legally required representation review is not required until 2027, but we can undertake one after 3 years, or we can make minor boundary changes. The law permits that for us. Oh, here. Touch screen?
No.
It's not a touch screen. Okay. We're having some technical difficulties here.
It's unusual.
We do have the presentation as well, so.
Okay, good. Okay. So council gave us a directive on the 26th of July for information and discussion regarding the possibility of a representative next year. Just remind everyone about the earlier decisions that council has made, resolved in 2023 to move back to the first past the post electoral system for the 2025 training election, and resolved in 2020 for Māori wards, and under the legislation, once you establish Māori wards, it's there for a minimum of 2 training elections. So that's 2022 and 2025 elections. And basically from this briefing this morning, I really would like some guidance from council if a representation review is required next year or not. How do I do that? That one? Okay. Just on Māori wards, as I said earlier, it resolved in 2020 to establish Māori wards for 2022 and 2025. Can't be revisited until 2026 in principle. In 2020, with 9 councillors, there is a formula under the Local Electoral Act, which gave 1 Māori ward councillor and 8 general ward councillors. And you can see there that there's under the formula, it's 1.34, and we round to the nearest whole number, and we round it down. If we undertake a rep review in 2024 and use the current latest figures, which is June 2022, retaining 9 councillors, formula changes to 1.45, still rounded down to 1, still 1 Māori and 8 general. However, if we adopt the latest figures, 30th of June 2023, which I understand are coming out this week, they haven't been released yet, I haven't seen them, the formula could increase to over 1.5, resulting in 2 Māori and 7 general. So just raising that for councillors' information. So I don't know what the figures are. They're due out this week. I've been advised. Current arrangements, all familiar. Mayor, 9 councillors elected from wards. There they are there, and no community boards. There's the map of our district. Briefly, what is a representation review? A review of council membership and the basis of election. It includes a whole raft of things. I'll put them up there. Total number of councillors, whether councillors are elected from wards. Now we must have wards because we have Māori wards and general wards. Or some councillors can be elected at large, and some councillors elected from wards, and we call that the mixed system. So that's something that we could look at if a representation review occurred next year. Look at the names and boundaries of wards, number of councillors elected from each ward or at large if you had a mixture, and whether to establish community boards or not, and if you do, the makeup of the community boards. So under legislation, there are 3 key principles that we need to look at when we undertake a representation review. The first one is we must identify our communities of interest. So it's areas where one feels a sense of community and belonging, access to goods, daily goods and services, physical and topographical figures come into play. So we really look at what are our communities of interest. Have they changed in the last 3 years is a critical question that I'd be asking. The second thing we have to look at is looking at the effective representation of these identified communities of interest. So we look at what's the best number of councillors to represent the district. And actually legislation says you can have between 5 and 29. No council goes to the extreme, but you need to look at that. What's the best number to represent this district? Whether those numbers of those councillors are elected from wards or mixed, said earlier, and then ward names and boundaries. And also we are obliged to look at community boards. So you don't have them now, but you must look at them. The answer may still be no, but you must look at them under legislation. Third principle is fair, ensuring fair representation. That's what we call the plus or minus 10% rule. Each councillor.
Can I interrupt you there, please? Mike, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Dale. Just going back to the previous slide, council can have between 5 and 29 members. Can you provide us any background into when and how we arrived at 9?
Historically, it's been 8, and then I think it moved 2 or 3 triennials ago to 9. It really is a council law decision. What is the best number to represent our community? You could go down to 6, you could go up to 10 or 12. It's purely a council decision. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lambeth.
And directly on that, if we go down to 6 councillors, we would then equal what our other partners have in our ratios with Whangarei and Far North. Is that correct? Because they have far fewer councillors, or their ratio is a lot higher than what our low number is.
Well, it varies right across the country. So you want to be looking like with the population or number of electors here for a similar council, similar sized council. Some of them, I'm looking at even further down south, the Stratford district, which is half the size or a third of the size in population. They've got 11 councillors. So it really is a local decision. How many do we think best reflects our district?
But the question was, as far as Northland goes, like, for example, Whangarei is 1.72 or something like that. The Far North District Council is getting close to 1.8, and you said we're 1.3, moving up to 1.4. So,
yeah, look, I don't know the figures for the other. Sorry, I don't know the figures off the top of my head for the other 2 councils. Yeah, but I can certainly get that if you'd like me to.
Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Nair.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I've been through a few of these reviews before with Dale, and so what happens if you do go down that track? Dale will work up a whole range of options of different numbers of seats and how they might be laid out, and he'll crunch the numbers on them so that they stack up in accordance with the requirements. And then we go out and consult with the community. They feedback, do you want less, do you want more, and all that sort of stuff. So there's a way to go if you decide to go down that track, but it does get very well analysed.
Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is more to do with coming up local government reforms and a lot of adjustment. Is it worthwhile for us to even consider it in these circumstances when there might be amalgamation of councils and all coming up?
Well,
Do you have any update? Yeah, thank you.
no, I don't. I know. Sorry, I don't have a crystal ball either. But we have a change in government as well. I don't know how that's going to change the thinking of the previous government. Whether local government reform is still on the agenda. There's a whole lot of open questions that I can't answer. So probably my personal view is you've done a number of reviews every 3 years for the last years or so. You don't actually need to do one this time round. Happy if you, as a political decision, to do one, but you actually don't need to do one. And as you've raised, there is some degree of uncertainty out there. I don't know what.
Thank you.
And one more question, then we'll let Dale finish his presentation before we have further questions. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the Maori ward issue, it's not so much a matter of an increase in Maori population so much as people who are Maori on the general role transferring to the Maori role. Would that be more correct?
We must use the Maori electoral population and the general electoral population. And the Maori electoral population, one of the basis of that is on the Maori electoral roll, but it also includes all those under 18 as well. It's quite a complex formula that's set out in legislation. So
it could be quite if there was a campaign for Maori people to transfer to the Maori role, then that could have a significant impact on the numbers. It seems like it's getting close.
It could. Unfortunately, yes, you're right, but we have to deal with population estimates.
Sure.
Yeah, so we're currently using 2022. Hopefully, I think it's 2023 that will come out. With regard to the 2023 census, I understand that that's not going to be released until mid next year. And I've also been advised by the Local Government Commission that it won't be in a format that we can use for representation reviews when it is released. So their advice so far to the sector is you must use population estimates as at 2023.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. If you could continue with your presentation, Dale, and then we'll have questions at the end now. Thank you.
So there's the fair representation. That's your plus or minus 10%. Every councillor represents about the same number of people. If there's any variance outside of that, it goes automatically off to the Local Government Commission and they will determine the outcome. All current general wards currently comply. There it is there. There's the chart using the 30th of June 2022 figures. We're looking at general wards only because we only have one Māori ward, so we remove that from the equation, and we can see there it's +4, +1, -8. So actually they all currently comply. There's no issues there, non-compliance currently. If we were to do a representation review next year, as Councillor Larson has indicated, it's quite a complex process. It's very prescriptive under legislation. Lots of consultation that occurs. So we'd have our briefing today, we'd have informal consultation November to March. We'd have another briefing to consider what options. I'd bring a number of scenarios to the table. At the 29th of May meeting, there would be a council resolution to adopt one. So look at a whole range of scenarios, but you can only have one as the initial proposal. That one goes out for the public consultation. And then we do a public notice, and then we have a 6-week, or I'm suggesting an 8-week public submission period. Council then hears and considers those submissions, and then from those makes a final proposal. That final proposal may be the initial proposal. It may change following on from hearing of those submissions to a final proposal. Public notice is then required for that one. Again, there is another period of objection or appeals. So again, the public gets 2 bites of the cherry if they like to have their say. And then the final proposal becomes the basis of election. If there's no appeals or objections, or it falls outside the plus or minus 10%, then it's automatically forwarded to the Local Government Commission, and they are charged by the 10th of April 2025 to have a determination. So last slide, process. The full process takes about 12 months. I've suggested November 23 to November 24. As indicated, it's quite prescribed. It's quite a complex process. We've got to get it right. We've got to dot the I's and cross the T's. It requires public consultation, and you can have informal consultation prior to the formal process. Start the process, you've got 2 bites of formal consultation, and it does have a cost. So our costs to do that would be around 20,000. There might be additional council costs for informal consultation. So that's a ballpark figure that council would be up for. So my final question there is, should a representation review be undertaken in 2024?
Okay, before we give guidance, would anyone like to ask any further questions of Dale?
Yes, just a matter of clarification, please, Mr. Mayor. Dale, you say that with great disappointment that the 2023 census is going to be redundant in terms of for this, which is a crazy scenario, really. So the estimates, population estimates that we're going to have to work on, how then are they created? Are they created from council record?
Definitely not. They are created from the Department of Statistics. So they have their formulas of what you apply, et cetera, for every year for a population estimate. They're then released, and they are the then ones that must be used under legislation. If there's no current census, then we must use the population estimates. Now, we've been advised by, and it's only advised from the Local Government Commission, that the census will be released, but it won't be in a format that we can use until after this process, which I agree is nonsense, but that's the advice. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, I just want to give some guidance. I'd like to see a review myself. That's my view. I think it's a democratic process that is important Anyone else like to make some feedback? Councillor Naya?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would not like to spend any more money on representation review, considering the dynamics might change. So if you're asking for guidance today, I would say, no, we don't want to go for a review. It's not warranted, it's not legally warranted, and I don't think there's any urgent need to do it. So I will be no for it. Thank you.
Councillor Lambeth?
Yes, I'd like to, Mayor, I'd like to see a review. It's democracy, it's part of the process. We have a changing population here in this district and we need to keep on top of it. I do believe that we have too many councillors for the representation we do with our neighbouring councils. And I think there needs to be a bit of an evening up of the numbers and levelling. I suspect that a reduced number of councillors will increase the quality that we get too. Thank you.
Councillor Howard?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I favour a representation review. I think that there are so many dynamics that are happening in our area that it's hard enough to keep up with it, ourselves, let alone through population estimates. So we've got to stay on top of it.
Councillor Paniora?
Just a quick question. So just in terms of the Māori board thing, you've said that the statistics that might be released in the next week or so could have the potential of 2 Māori ward councillors, but the Māori ward itself can't be established for the next biennium. So not only will we be potentially spending $30,000 of ratepayers' money, but it might result in 2 Māori ward councillors. So just be careful what you wish for with my.
So what is your feedback, that you don't want to review?
No, I'm just saying I'm sitting on the fence here because it's.
Okay.
It's not.
Right. Oh, well, maybe
Unless.
I'd like to give your feedback later. Anybody else like to give some guidance? Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Vincent.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're not making a decision. We're sitting here in a briefing, and a decision will be made subsequently if we do one through a council meeting. So you're not tied by what you say today. I'm quite keen to definitely push ahead and look at doing a review. I think there's some good things to look at here. Look at the new numbers, see how it might stack up. And I quite like Councillor Lambeth's suggestion that maybe we could be a little bit more streamlined in how many people we have, and that operating on a pool of remuneration means that if you do have less people, then the remuneration for each councillor is higher, and it might make it more worthwhile. As we all know, we're currently working on about 5 cents an hour. So, so yeah, I say let's push on with it. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My first preference is, and I would put my vote with Councillor Naya in terms of just keeping the money in our pockets. But a further thought in relation to the prospect of second Māori ward councillor. From what I observed with the last electoral process, I was most impressed by the quality of the candidates who put themselves forward for that ward. And it would be no bad thing if we had a second Māori ward councillor, in my opinion. And so I certainly would be open to that, but I think that my first preference is to save the money. But this, as Councillor Larson says, we're not making a decision here today. So we need to have the opportunity to make a formal decision, and that's my inclination at this stage.
Dale?
Just a point of clarification, it may increase to 2 if you retain 9.
Yes.
Go below 9,
We end up
we
with.
go to 2, potentially.
I'm well aware of the option presented by, I think, Mangawhai Matters in their submission, which I think had a total of 7 councillors, 6 general ward and 1 Māori ward councillor, which actually met the criteria. So, yeah, that's a prospect for the future.
Karen Wilson Collins.
Thank you. Yeah, my initial thoughts are that it's not required, because it's money that we don't have to spend, and we seem to be erring on the side of caution and only doing what's legislatively required by us by legislation. And I don't see why this should be any different. But I do hear the concerns around the table that perhaps our district does have an excess of representation, and it would be interesting to talk to the community about that. But whether that needs to be done now, considering we've just did a representation review, or whether that can be done the next time around.
Councillor Paniora.
Sorry, I just want to add to that because we've started to flow into that territory. I'm trying to consultation with the public. Would they prefer to have less councillors, so less representation around the table into committees that we have, or would they prefer for less councillors, less representation, but those councillors get more money in their pocket? I mean, again, that's my comment there.
Okay, Councillor Wilson. Limbs.
Thank you.
Williams Collins.
Going to be a long day.
It's already.
Yeah, look, lots of great comments and points made. I think it would be good to kind of leave it open-ended, and yeah, it could be worth looking into, I think, having a review, so.
Anyone else want to give some feedback? I'll get to see Maris to wrap it up then.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Great timing as well. Look, a couple of points here. As Dale said, a rep review only has to occur every 6 years. Technically, we've done it every 3 years in the last 2 representation reviews, so we're overdoing it there. And you've got to think about the ramifications for your community and understanding the electoral cycle and the electoral boundaries every time we change, okay? So there is an impact on the community by doing a review. There is a cost to it as well, as Dale has pointed out. And I don't want you to be under any illusion here. There is a lot of work in this. There's a lot of work for you. There's a lot of work for our staff as well. And you'll be doing this in an LTP year as well. So you're adding quite a bit of pressure and workload on both yourselves and the staff in this space, although respecting, of course, your ability to make that decision. We are going to bring a report to the November council meeting where you get to formally decide on whether or not you want to do this or not. My job is to provide a recommendation, and I think my recommendation to you would be not to, but that's up to you to decide around the table. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, thank you, Dale. If we can move to the next item. There's Mangawhai Branch Library presented by Lisa Salter. I'm just going to go and get a glass of water. Okay.
Through the chair. Rena. Thank you for your time to talk about our proposal to create a branch library in Mangawhai, recognizing the impact that population growth is having on the area and our elderly volunteers. So we're here to seek support or direction on turning Mangawhai Library into a volunteer-run community library, fully funded, professionally staffed branch of the Kuihi Libraries in this financial year or next financial year. This presentation will provide you as elected members with a background of Mangawhai Library, impacts of Mangawhai becoming a branch library, and next steps. So I think we're all aware that Mangawhai's population is growing. It surpassed Doggerville in 2018 and is forecasted to double by 2064. The volunteers have issued 24,398 items in the last financial year. This compares to Doggerville loaning 73,200 items with paid staff, and the community libraries issuing between 4,000 and 5,000. So there's a huge difference in loans at Mangawhai. Due to the volunteers, there's limited hours a week that they're open, which is 15. There's limited after-school hours and there's very little opportunity for holiday programs, any kind of programs. The volunteers are tired and they're time limited. Majority of them are in their 70s. As far as I know, there's only one below 70 and she's in her 50s. They're facing pressures to provide an increasingly digital and professional service. The head volunteer librarian has requested paid staff take on the operation of the service, and this approach is supported by the library staff. We're looking at community hubs in the library strategy. We have feedback through consultation and annual resident surveys that highlight a need for a library hub in Mangawhai. So there's just a few images of the library. It does look great in some places. It does need some work in others, but man, they have worked hard and they are doing a great job, those volunteers. If we were to make Mangawhai a branch library, the impact would be an instant lift to the library hours, looking at doubling them to 30. Accessibility, especially for youth after school and for families. It would provide a more equitable service across the Kaipara. It recognizes that Mangawhai is a growing area, surpassing Dargaville's population in 2018. It will also help us build a staff presence and capacity in Mangawhai for when future facilities and services. And it also supports the Kaipara as a place to be. Our vision within and outside of the district see that we are progressing plans to and invest in key community facilities. We are now seeking support or direction from the elected members for Mangawhai Community Library to become a branch of Kaipara Libraries with paid staff within this financial year or in the next financial year from July 2024 with the LTP.
Councillor Paniora, you have a
I
question?
have a few questions that I've received prior. Would you like me to answer those first?
If you could, and then we'll move to Councillor Paniora's question and any further questions. And
Thank you. Councillor Aaron Wilson Collins asked, would staff be able to work at either Mangawhai or Dargaville Library? And yes, that would be very possible. We already visit the libraries once a week from Dargaville, so there's a great connection. And would we continue to use the volunteers? The answer is yes. From Councillor Rachel Williams, she would like to know how much funding does Dargaville Library receive per annum and what is the operational budget? The answer to that is that currently Mangawhai's $16,200. Okay, yep. And Dargaville is about 300K operating and 61,000 for books. And Councillor Vincent has asked if we could show a table of the current budget alongside what it would look like in the future. So I don't have a table, but I can talk you through. The current grant for Mangawhai is $16,200 a year. It's all the money they get. Proposed operational budget would be $50,000 for the next financial year. Proposed staffing would be up to $150,000. And we have some money in some current budget to cover the cost of refurbishment or just improving the library there of $70,000.
So are you saying that's 150 plus 50 plus 70?
150 plus 50 would be the annual amount that we'd be asking
Cost.
for in the LTP. The 70 we already have.
Yeah, so of that
One off.
200,000, what is in the budget for that currently?
What is what, sorry?
What's available currently?
So through the chair, currently we only have 16,200 that we pay towards the Mangawhai Library. We have no budget and no forecast and long-term plan for staffing in the Mangawhai Library. We're just now here at this briefing seeking support and direction if that's something that's acceptable, and if it is, we can either put those numbers in through the long-term plan process, or if you want to do it in the next financial year, or if you would like to do it in this financial year, we can go back, identify the rental costs, and do some real refinement of that, those costings, and bring them to you in the November meeting.
Councillor Paniora?
Just a couple of the thoughts that I have. We've already finalised our annual budget, so I don't think that it's wise to look at that. But in the short term, I think what's already been mentioned about sharing resources with Dargle staff is potentially an option. I noticed that the 70,000 is just a one-off, so like if it's a long-term thing, it's not like we can decide on something and then the following year say, well, we don't have this, because you're still going to have those operational costs past the year where you've got the one-off 70,000, is that correct? And then we've also potentially got 3 million that's going to be earmarked for a community hub for Mangawhai. So it doesn't make sense to us just in the meantime to do any sort of long-term, give any sort of long-term guarantees on that. So my direction would be to wait to see what happens with the $3 million Better Off funding, to work on something in the interim with our current staff that we already have, and then maybe put something towards it to try and subsidize with that.
So through the chair, the $70,000 would just be small retrofitting, so updating the counter, getting the digital services and updating the shelving, getting a tea room put in there. If we need to staff it for 30 hours a week, we would need to provide a tea room.
Okay.
Yep, and that money is already approved in the annual plan for Dargle Mangawhai Library improvements with 150,000 this year that we can spend. So we would use that 70,000 from that budget. It would be just a one-off. Given the Better Off funding package, even if that money is put back to Mangawhai for shovel-ready projects, we don't have money in the long-term plan for a physical building in Mangawhai. So the time frame, I guess, to improve the level of service in Mangawhai to be able to offer that those services, it's a long time out in the future. So what we're hoping to do is something to get us through and bridge us to be able to provide a better level of service of Mangawhai until that hub is available for them.
Okay, Councillor Larson.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I guess the points arising from that feedback are that yeah, we have finalised our budgets for the year, and we do have a surplus in our staff budget of something like about $1 million actually. The other point is that we actually don't have any staff there. It's volunteer run, so we can't rely on the existing staff because, as we've been told, they're volunteers that are wanting to be helped. And I would support you bringing back some numbers to the meeting for us to have a look at. Thank you.
Councillor Erin Wilson-Collins, followed by Councillor Howard, and then Councillor Lambert. Did you have your hand up?
Thank you. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback from the community over the years about our library services in Mangawhai and lack thereof. So yeah, bring back some more information, and I think we need to look at being able to support our community and their wellbeing down there.
Thank you, Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Lisa. Can you please just remind me, how is the Dargaville operation funded? Is it a targeted rate or is that just general rates?
General rates.
General rates.
It's general rates. Okay. And I think that the other point I'd make is that this is, as much as anything else, recognition of a cry from the volunteers. And as you say, they're elderly, and, you know, that has to be respected. And I would certainly encourage bringing forward some more information for us to make a decision on. I think that we owe it to these people. The risk is we totally lose our facility over there. And I think that whilst it may be plausible to share staff across both facilities, or both main facilities, I suspect that that comes with an additional cost, and it certainly also compromises the service factor at both ends, potentially.
Point of order. Is that misrepresentation? I haven't seen in here that we'll be losing the
No,
potentially.
we're just discussing and asking questions and giving feedback.
Chair?
No, hang on. You want to be in line, you'll have another opportunity after Ash. Councillor Lambeth?
Just to clarify,
Can you,
just to clarify, you said that staff do travel down to Mangawhai on a regular basis to support. My concern is an hour and a half each way is a massive waste of manpower. Would that be reduced somewhat with a permanent staff member in Mangawhai?
So through the chair, do a weekly library exchange run. So we stop at each library on the way down and each library on the way back. And that's how we change the books around. And while we're there, we help whatever we can. If we were to go ahead with having paid staffing in Mangawhai, we would anticipate that the training element of it would involve the staff traveling, but eventually we would hope to see staff pretty much housed at one side or the other.
Thank you.
Councillor Naya, followed by Councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So library, as I said, is a must for, at least in the thinking of parents. The kids should learn all those things. My question is more related to the lack of volunteers in there. Mangatroto, I guess, has a library run by volunteers for goodness know how many decades. I would like to see some numbers in terms of the effort made. Opportunity Factory also runs on volunteers, I think. There is an Opportunity Factory, or whatever you call it, right in the heart of Wood Street. So I would like to see some definite numbers in terms of effort made to get the volunteers, and also whether we are going for part-time, what's the cost? Because it's a liability on general rate forever, whether people use the library or don't use the library. So it'll be good if we have some numbers, and definitely we are for library, no doubt about that. But I'd like to see some money not wasted. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Paniora, followed by Councillor Williams.
So is there a potential to lose the library?
Okay, so through the chair, at the moment, we're running the library with volunteers, and they bring in their own volunteers through their own process, but we can cover that. But just to bring you back to the Mangawhai question and the Mangawhai question around our volunteers, the reason we're only talking about Mangawhai at the moment is because of the vast numbers that we're asking our volunteers to issue, and the service that they're being demanded by the community to provide. The volunteers have advised us that they are struggling to provide that level of service. They haven't said they're going to walk out. They would still like to continue to support us as we move into this.
Thank you, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, so I've lived in Mangawhai for 20 years, and this service is still the same as it was then. 20 years of voluntary service for the library. So I fully support spending 150K to get some staff in there, to bring the facility up to spec. Our growth is exponential. We're not servicing the community in this space. So if it's from general rates, I fully support 150K. Let's do it and come back to the meeting so we can see the figures, please.
Councillor Manderson, followed by Councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Your Honour. I think one of the things you have to be careful of is, one, I'm sympathetic with those people that might not be willing to further volunteer, but one of the features of the country is have a city, you've got everything paid for and you pay for everything. And you've got to be careful, I think, that way. My partner has worked for 10 or 20 years as a volunteer at the Regional Museum, then at the Mangawhai Library. She wouldn't think of being paid for it. It keeps her involved with the community. So that's a decision for others, not for me.
Okay, councillor Paniora.
I just wanted to say that surely it would, instead of just agreeing to 150,000, to pay people, that would at least a step in there of putting expressions out to other citizens of Mangawhai that may want to volunteer, because it is a community oriented, and there are people out there that do want to feel that sense of belonging and don't, you know, have employment if they're retired or whatever. So just to jump straight to the nuclear option and say, yep, we're going to fund this because we've had a request, I think is a disservice to the community. And I take my hat off if it's been the same for 20 years. Isn't that something that's to be applauded, that, you know, it's had volunteers for 20 years. So there's definitely some appetite there for volunteers. Thank you.
Can I respond?
Okay, councillor Howard, followed by councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Lisa, with the staffing at Dargaville, how many staff are paid and how many volunteers do we actually retain?
We have one volunteer at Dargaville Library. The rest are paid.
How many paid? 8 paid.
Point of order relevant.
There's no point of order in this meeting. Put your hand up if you want to have another say, otherwise you need to wait your turn, please.
I'm endeavouring to clarify sort of numbers because I'm coming is that the question is, in your talking of the 150,000 for Mangawhai, how many staff do you envisage that might involve?
Through the chair. So it's 2 or 1 full-time and 2 part-time, but this is a branch library.
Yep.
Dargaville will remain the public library, and although we are based in Dargaville, we do work really hard with those community libraries. We're already doing a lot of work in those communities, and so we know where they are and how things are going. And this is not one request for support. This is a years and years of needing more from us.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of points. One is I think the request for funding of a permanent positions should be handled through the long-term plan process, and because there are a lot of words that we'll have to juggle and work our way through. And we're obviously, our general approach, as you would have seen, is we're in a cost-saving mode, so we just have to cut our costs accordingly. The other is I can put my hand up as an advocate and a trustee of an organisation called Volunteering Northland, which is an introductory service for organisations wanting volunteers and people interested in volunteering. And perhaps I could do more to promote it. It is available online as a service, which might, because you know, I think the demographics of Mangawhai will show there are a lot of people of a retired age, and from personal experience, 70 isn't elderly.
We fully respect and appreciate volunteers. We obviously rely upon them across the district in our community facilities. The issue in Mangawhai is that the community in Mangawhai is growing. There's a lot of digital demands, and our volunteers are struggling to maintain the level of service that the communities are expecting of them. They have gone out to look for volunteers, and because of the demand, there's not a lot of volunteers that want to be in that space because it is essentially a part-time role for them. So that's why we're looking at this, but we're happy to crunch those numbers and come up with those full details and come back at the November meeting.
Okay, look, I'm going to have one more, Councillor and Wilson Collins, then I'll ask CE Maris to wrap it up and we'll move on. And if you have any direction.
That's all I was going to request, so carry on.
By email. Sorry, you had your question answered, didn't you?
What I was going to say was, in the interest of time, can we ask this
okay.
direction and move on?
Right, thank you very much, Lisa, and
Yeah, so through you, Mr Mayor, what we're going to do is we'll bring a report back to a future council meeting, probably November, here to get some direction of decision making. We'll provide more information and some options around that for you.
okay, so the next item is private road setting extension policy. And Cherie Monday will be presenting that. Thank you.
Māori. Sorry, wrong glasses.
Morena, so this item is about the private road seal extension policy. As I understand it, council at a recent briefing or meeting requested to have an item brought to this briefing on this matter. Normally, the business owner of the policy would be presenting this item to you. That position is currently vacant at council, so I'm your standing. But depending on the technicality of any questions you may have, I might defer to my colleagues for support to answer your questions. Very briefly, the substantive elements of the policy are that council may consider setting a targeted rate for up to 50% of the total road sealing project. The community goes through the steps and requests support from council. Those are the substantive elements of the policy. There's some other elements about the policy in the policy that say that council may up to 20% of the cost of such an application, depending on a certain criteria as provided for in the policy. My understanding is that there have been a number of applications made since the policy came into play. None of these applications have made the required threshold for community agreement for the funding application. And also just to confirm that depending if an application were to receive 75% or higher agreement of the affected community, then all community members, even those who did not request it and did not agree to it, would be required to contribute to the sealing project in the same manner as those who have voted for it. This policy was due for review next month, if I understand it. Depending on the feedback today, it is proposed that a full review would proceed. Matters of this policy possibly maybe cause confusion regarding the LTP process being currently undertaken, so any consultation on the policy would be recommended to be undertaken after the LTP process.
Questions, Councillor Lambeth?
Thank you. I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or not, but when you do get 50% and 50%, does that whole budget then get the central government funding for roading?
You are correct, Councillor. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I'm hoping one of my colleagues may be able to step in.
Councillor Paniora?
So I note that the position is vacant at the moment. So what happens with the decisions that are made today? Who's going to actually be doing the work?
Well, if that would be negotiated with, hopefully the position will be filled in due course. And my role, in terms of my role, I support the business owners of each policy to do their review processes. I walk alongside that person, so I would support any staff who would be undertaking the review. Does that answer the question, Councillor?
Yeah, it's just like difficult to ask questions when I have someone in front of me rolling his eyes every time I speak. I think it'll be less of that. Okay.
Sorry, can't hear the comments.
Councillor, can you lift your voice when you're speaking? I can't hear you either, unfortunately. Councillor Lambeth?
Yes, just to my question, I think we have an answer from.
So you're asking, NZTA does not subsidise the sealing of the roads. However, once they're sealed, then they will give us subsidy at 62%. But obviously, sealed roads cost more than maintain. That the question be open.
Thank you.
Councillor Naya?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I guess we need to have some information on what has been done in the past on sealing private roads. Are they unsealed or like the way we get 62%? What was the experience? So for decision, it would be a good idea to know what's the previous experiences. In Kaipara, how many roads we have done this way? If the policy is there, we haven't done anything, the policy should not be there. If we have done something, we should learn from it. There's no idea, direction or whatever you call it, not going around community consultation with no stats. So the past should guide us how to go about it. So that'll be good if we get some numbers on that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Through the chair, that would be the review process.
Yeah.
It'd be reporting back to you on how many applications have been made, what the outcome was, et cetera, for your information.
Thank you.
councillor Larson.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just need to be, I think we need to be clear. This is not sealing private roads. This is the public roads being sealed because the ratepayers initiate wanting to get it sealed and commit to having some form of funding arrangement that they fund.
Thank you.
And from my understanding of what we heard earlier, there have been a couple of applications for one road and no one was ever able to meet the thresholds to get it over the line. So that would be the statistics that you would get.
But just to clarify, the submissions to the 221 requested a reduction. Yeah, that's what I'd like to support. I'd like to make it easier for residents to be able to seal their roads if they want to get together and do it. Councillor Howard?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You've just clarified my initial point. My other point would be, as part of this, in terms of the funding, and I think that, you know, it says there that that a targeted rate is set for no longer than 10 years. Now, that's essentially where the policy is at the moment. So perhaps to facilitate this and make this, I mean, I asked the question of why is 51% of the ratepayers affected by a road not sufficient to make a decision, i.e. make it easier to make a decision, and why could we not look at a different policy that actually helps fund it over a longer period of time? So there are other aspects, other ways of looking at this.
Through the chair, absolutely. I mean, this policy was developed, as I understand it, policy was developed in response to the then council's approach to road sealing, and in response to ensuring that there was a transparent and consistent approach to any requests from communities who wish to have their roads sealed and contribute to that funding. Any review process would be subject to reviewing the matters the council raises, absolutely.
And if I might just add, I'm in saying those comments, I am by no means, in no way abrogating that, you know, council forgoes its responsibilities of developing roads properly. But we do give more flexibility for residents who want to do something about their environment and benefit themselves ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Aaron Wilson-Collins.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the submissions that you talk about in your presentation and the people that have come to speak to us about not being able to get over the threshold. And I really want to be able to find a solution for them. I agree that the aspects of the policy to be looked at, maybe it's a longer term funding, maybe there's something else to be done there. I wouldn't like to see 75% threshold changed, because as you've said, the targeted rate is still applied to those that didn't agree to it. I can only imagine people wouldn't agree to it because they possibly can't afford to contribute. And I wouldn't like, they wouldn't sit comfortable with me that we would then be applying a targeted rate to properties. I mean, 75%, you've still got 25% of those properties. It might only be one property, but it could be 3 or 4 properties depending on the road. I wouldn't like to see that change, but I would like to have a review of the policy to see if there is any way to make it possible for the policy to actually be implemented. My understanding is that this policy is in place simply because council will not fund road sealing. So we don't have the funding, and this was one thing for people to still get their roads funded. But as you've told us this morning, it hasn't worked. So I agree, a policy needs to be able to be implemented. How that's going to work, I don't know. Going to be challenging for the staff when you're short-staffed as well. But being able to find a way for it to be implemented, and for those people who are desperate to have their roads sealed, and being able to actually get some leeway on that would be great. Don't know what the answer is, but happy to look at it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay, councillor Larson, followed by councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I think it's not nearly as complicated as it's being made out. It's quite simple. I think that we need to get some runs on the board with our proposed dependable roading push. It's the biggest issue we have with people. I've been through this process with the applicants in the past who lobbied heavily to try and get this workable. The small sample that we have shows it doesn't work because the threshold's too high and no one can meet it. And I think that there are ways to make this really simple and work well. And I think the first thing you can do is, at the moment, it requires 50% capital up front. We don't need to do that. We're going to end up in a situation where we potentially have quite a huge ability to debt fund, with our debt potentially being written off. And all you do is you fund it over a long time period where all of the cost falls on that road because they are going to be paying back the capital and servicing the debt through the targeted rate. And what you do is you go out, and if they get their majority, that's up to them. You come and you do the calcs for them. When you go back with the calcs, give them a range of options. So they could choose to pay all of their capital share up front and get it at a discount because it's not going to be capitalised over the long term. And then you can just have a range of options where you find your majority consensus, where you go, if you do it over 10 years, it'll cost this much per year. If you do it over 15, or if you do it over 20, and then you go and get your majority by, at whatever threshold majority of people agree, you do it over that period. You don't do it over the shorter period. So I think it's very simple to draw it up. I am not in favour of pushing it down the road and waiting for another year of consultation before we're gone. I do not believe that it is confusing for us to go and consult with it along with the LTP at all. I think we should get on with it. Thank you.
Councillor Vincent, followed by Councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do think it's be an interesting competition of people's democratic rights between 75% and the 25%, and how that's resolved, because yeah, it's nice to find a win-win if we can, and it may be the review process would help us to find that. I don't see a problem with putting it running in tandem with the LTP review process, actually, in terms of public consultation. The one thing I'd like to know is, if we do this review, what is the cost of doing the review?
Through the chair, staff time.
And that would be?
We'd hate to guess, to be honest. I don't have the info.
I mean, this is operational process, so it's just not.
Because it's due.
I mean, I would, through the chair, I would say that the reason some of these reviews take quite some time is because staff write a report that goes to a briefing, election members give us feedback, and then we write a report for a council decision, and then we consult. So the thing is that even if staff are working as fast as they can, many of these processes take up to 6 months anyway. But that doesn't mean the staff are working on that matter full time. It's just the process to get things in front of council for decisions. So it does, that's the primary reason why these things take as long as they do, rather than, it's not taking 6 months of staff time.
My question wasn't about the time, it was about the cost.
Yeah, so cost is staff time.
Just how much?
Okay, look, we're time again. Can you, if you've got any more questions or feedback, please email that in. I'll just wrap this up again with CEO Maris.
I could speak and
You already spoke twice and we want to move on. Thank you, Councillor Maris. CEO Maris.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So just as far as direction goes, so hearing the direction, you want to review the policy, that's fine. We'll look at, see if we can include it in the LTP. The reason why we suggested not was because it gets lost in the LTP in consultation. That's the reality, but that's fine. We can include it in that. So we will bring that back. Can I make a plea? You're right, Councillor Larson, it can be fairly simple. If you have feedback on this policy, could you please email that directly to Shireen, so we can start incorporating that and having a look at it when we bring it back to you.
Can I just add, just for clarity through the chair, sorry, to Mr Maris, that the consultation would run alongside the LTP.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be part of the LTP. Yeah.
Good.
Okay,
Thank you, Shereen.
thank you very much, Shireen. Move on to the alcohol control bylaw statutory review. We've got Mrs. Virginia here.
Virginia, yep.
Hi,
Morning, Virginia, thank you.
exciting stuff, guys. I know that you love this.
We do. You would, actually.
I didn't bring any samples, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry. Okay, so, Morena koutou. So you're talking about the statutory review of the alcohol control bylaw. But we'll just get into it, shall we? Okay, so before we get to the statutory review process, which is the majority of what the report is about, it's important for elected members to understand that the register that holds the alcohol ban areas in it is not part of the bylaw. It's like our signs bylaw, and it's going to be like our cemeteries and crematoria. It's a skeleton bylaw, which enables council to place alcohol bans over areas, and yeah. So it's really important. So that's what this slide's about. So you'll see up here that beneath the Local Government Act, the alcohol control bylaw itself is part of the scope for the statutory review. The bylaw itself enables the bylaw control document, which is the register of resolutions, and that's the one that council controls. They can add, they can amend it at any time. So because it sits outside the bylaw, we don't have to do a full bylaw review process anytime council wants to add new places or take new places off. And so that sits outside, and as you can see, the bylaw, including the register, are regulated by the police, by the New Zealand Police. We don't regulate it, the New Zealand Police does. And the bylaw also too gives them more powers to have a proactive approach to dealing with people drinking or disorderly or crime or things like that in our public places within the district. It's it gives them more proactive powers to intercede before having to arrest people or using the Crimes Act or the Summary Offences Act to prosecute people. So we'll move on. Now, I just have to say that this slide is incorrect. I did it on purpose so that you get interested. No. So this arrow here, but from here, these arrows over here, well, this one goes straight back up to here. Okay, so this is our part of our statutory review process that we need to complete in order to meet our statutory requirements under the LGA. Is this step here. Okay, so once we've made those decisions, that's when we'll move over to section 160, and that's when you'll decide what you want to do with the future of the bylaw. Do you want to keep the bylaw, amend the bylaw, revoke the bylaw? So that's when we go from here to here. Okay? Is that all right?
There is my.
I did.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But this is what your report's mainly about, okay? Is about this process, the statutory process, and letting you know where our statutory requirements are in order for us to complete the review. So the statutory review is due on the 19th of December this year. If we miss it, and you'll see that in paragraph 2 of your report, 2 or 3, oh wait, no, actually not that more. So you'll see in paragraph 3 and 4 of the report that those are the implications if we don't meet the statutory 5-year review period. Okay, so if the review of the bylaw is not completed, section 160A provisions apply, in which case the bylaw and its provisions and the current alcohol control bylaw or bans will still continue for 2 years, but then it's automatically revoked by the Act. But we do have that time, that period of time within those 2 years to make a new one. But again, that new bylaw will come down to the 5-year statutory review. If we review the bylaw within the 5-year statutory review, well, then the next one. Okay, so that's when we can move into the 10-year statutory review period. Again, this is why the resolution is really important and why it sits outside the bylaw, because in that 10 years, we can see a lot of change within the community, or the police might need some more powers in different areas. And so that's why it can be used as changed through council resolution, as long as it meets, it's got certain criteria that it still has to meet. But yeah, that's why we're not doing it with this review. Next is, so, yep. So in closing, statutory review process applicable to the alcohol control bylaw and necessary determinations have been explained. You'll see that in the slides and it's in the report. So the discussion is all those statutory steps. Councillor Boonham made aware that the statutory must be completed by the 19th of December. Risk having the statutory, having its statutory revoked by the 19th of December 2025. Moving on, staff will prepare a report that will enable council to make those statutory determinations. And yeah, any questions?
Any questions, councillor No?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, alcohol is one favourite subject of New Zealanders. So what I would like to know when you come forward with the decisions, in my personal experience for 20 years, if you open a bottle store, you get away with it most of the time, but you come across with great difficulty in private function getting a license. So would you be coming up with some options where you can actually make it simpler when you come for the briefing? How we can make it amended to make it simpler for those people in the community events and all.
That's not what this bylaw is about, sorry, Councillor.
Not?
No.
All right.
Councillor,
Can we also include vaping in this matter? No?
It's not a part of this either.
No? Okay.
Councillor Lambeth? You have a,
No, I could speak to this. 3 years after the Kaipara District Council was formed, I asked for a bylaw to control some of the drinking in parks, and that eventually morphed into what we have now. It's an essential part to deal with alcohol abuse in public places that we control, and it's vitally important that we keep this going. Thank you.
See, Maris, did you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, fairly simple. It's up there. We'll bring the report back to the December council meeting for decision, and we'll achieve our statutory compliance by doing that. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Virginia. We'll have
It's always
a 10-minute. Upper. Toilet stop. is proposed national policy statement, natural hazard decision making. Greg Wilson and Michael Day
Thanks, Chair.
present this item.
Good morning, elected members. I'd just like to start by introducing the team to Greg Wilson. He's stepped in to assist us in the district planning team leader space while Catherine Wastewater is on maternity leave. Welcome to the team, Greg. The report will take us read, thanks. Greg will go through the slide deck. So next slide, please, Greg. We'll get through this as quick as we can.
Okay,
So this slide here essentially says that New Zealand is susceptible to natural hazard risk, and it has been and continues to cause lots of damage. Greg. Similarly, natural hazard risk is prevalent in the Kaipara district at the moment. The predominant flood impacts, the predominant natural hazards are coastal flooding, coastal erosion and river flooding. Why might policy intervention be required from central government? The management of significant hazard risks is a Section 6 matter of national importance under the RMA. Currently, there is no national direction on natural hazard risk, i.e. there's no national policy statement. Multiple governments have been talking about promulgating one for some time. It hasn't arrived yet, so there is certainly a need for national direction on hazard management. We'll skip over this slide pretty quickly. It just frames where national policy statements sit under the RMA. Go next slide. Thanks, Greg. So, the draft statement has one objective and 7 policies. You have that in your attachments. There, I won't read over them word for word. Next slide. Thanks, Greg. Couple of key points from the draft national policy statement is that councils have to assess the level of natural hazard risk across the district, low, medium or high. They are asked to apply a precautionary principle, use the best available information at the time of making a decision as well. Next slide, thanks, Greg. So the team have prepared a draft submission, which is attached in your slide deck, attached in your information here. Couple of key points that we have emphasised and are looking for feedback, of course, from elected members, is that Kaipara is vulnerable to natural hazard risk. There is a support for a risk-based approach to managing natural hazard risk. But we really want to emphasise the point that central government intervention comes with a price locally, and we've touched on that in the submission, and that any intervention that central government puts forward to local councils leads to costs for ratepayers, landowners, councils, and they need to be cognizant of that as well. So direction sought today, the submission, we're going to have to use our delegation process to get it signed off. That involves the mayor choosing one other elected members and the CE as well to sign off. So 3 people sign it off. We are requesting elected members to give direction on which aspects of the draft submission they support, which aspects they do not support, if any, and where you want further direction, what's missing, etc., etc. Next slide, please. I'm suggesting a further week. You can get that to me directly. We'll then refine the submission and then get it signed off in due course and report it back to the next available council meeting to note.
So if there's any questions, otherwise I'd ask you to give your feedback or by email by the 8th of November. Is that correct, Michael?
Correct.
Okay, you can stand down. Thank you very much.
Quick, eh?
Nice and quick.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. The next item, item 6, is procurement, encouraging local suppliers, presented by John Bird. Thank you, John. John's present online.
He's supposed to be online, Mr Mayor, we'll just confirm.
Hello, can you hear me?
John there.
Come on,
Just give
John.
us 2 seconds to get your presentation up, John.
Thank you.
Over to you, John.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this items in response to, I think, some requests that the newer elected members put earlier in the year. So it's an information item about our procurement framework that council has. And so previously, 2014, when we had the commissioners, we had a what's called a procurement and contract management manual, and that included policy elements. And then we used that for many years. And then in 2019, there was a procurement strategy which was adopted by the elected council of the day. And then following that, just over a year ago, we adopted a new KDC procurement policy, which is very much aligned with a number of other councils around the country, including Parore, which we essentially basically used their template for ours as well. Could move to the next slide, please. And obviously this policy is to designed to help council achieve some broader procurement outcomes. And the government has a policy which is, I guess, not mandated, but recommended for local councils to use around using procurement to achieve some broader outcomes around, encouraging local business and employment and so forth. And so our strategy, if it was adopted in 2019, looked to ways to implement that at a very broad level. And then when we adopted the policy, we've included further scope in our policy to encourage the use of local suppliers. I think the other one that came about was when we had the emergencies later in the year, and obviously our procurement policy allows for emergency procurement, and we had examples where in the emergency we engaged local suppliers directly because they were best placed to assist us with our needs. So move to the next slide, please. And so the things we do in terms of encouraging local suppliers is making sure that wherever possible, we include them in invitations to tender and quote. Another way that we can make encouragement and look to use them is in the larger procurements where local organisations may not be able to be in a position to respond for the whole, is to encourage larger organisations that might be tendering to include local content and local subcontractors. And the important aspect is when we're going through the procurement planning, and as councillors will be aware, that where there's large procurements, more than 500k, those procurement plans are brought to council, and it should be that stage where it's clear that where appropriate, we've used looked at where we can use local contractors and where we can encourage local suppliers and contractors. So just moving to the next slide, please. In terms of the next steps, the 2019 strategy has been around for a while and things have changed, and obviously there's a new government coming, and so there may be a change to the broader procurement outcomes framework that's currently here. So we're proposing that in 2024 we'll do a review of the procurement strategy in the first instance. The policy itself is due for review in 2025, so it's got a 3-year life cycle before the first review. There's a couple of questions from elected members, which I'll just cover off now. One was around what is a local supplier? The policy doesn't actually define it, but I would describe it as a small or medium enterprise with significant portion of their operation based in the district. Not necessarily entirely owned by people within the district, but certainly that has a significant operation. Another elected member asked Councillor in terms of how we can encourage smaller local suppliers and what we do in that space. So one of the things we do is our health and safety person will work with smaller suppliers to get them to a stage where their documentation is allowing them to become a registered supplier with KDC. The other way, and we're just doing some procurement shortly coming up, where we can look to make it easier for the local suppliers, is instead of requiring written responses, actually getting some of the information from them through an interview process, where we ask them questions and get them to respond, rather than have to write screeds and screeds of written answers. So things like track record and capability and their people they can respond to and verbally in an interview situation, rather than have to prepare a big written response. Obviously the key things around pricing and stuff like that has to be in writing, but yeah, so that's another way that we can and do encourage local suppliers. Anecdotally, there is quite a bit of use of local suppliers around the district by council, not only directly but also through subcontracting arrangements. I notice in the last few months there's been a lot of subcontractors working for Ventia, helping with all the road repairs and stuff. People like Tulip Construction and Kaiwaka. Harrison's another contractor that is used quite extensively by council. Hewison and Parore have been used quite a bit in the past as well. I think there's Reed Construction over in Ruawai, been working on quite a bit on subcontracting for Ventia and so forth from my observations. So happy to take any questions or comments.
Councillor Nair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John. My question is on your graph where you said expected cost greater than $250,000, and you have a two-stage process, or yes or no? My question is on registration of interest. So, for example, in this time and age, 250,000 is a very low benchmark, and we end up with most of the things falling in above $250,000. So, how would you come back to us is how much we are using the tendering process at all, whether under two-stage or without two-stage, to make it simpler for people? Do they have to register with you before applying, or what?
Yeah, look, the two-stage doesn't always get used, but it can be quite useful. And so, for example, we're doing the procurement design for the transportable housing project for Mangawhai, and we're using a two-stage process. But the registration of interest is really, in the first stage, is really just suppliers saying yes, they would be interested in going further, and it's a simple form and tick checklist that they have to fill in. So it's not a very complex thing that they have to do in that first instance. So it's making it simple for contractors and suppliers to engage with council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, John. All I would like to see is more of the tendering process rather than exceptions to it. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lambert, followed by Councillor Paniora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a comment that was made, Mr. Bird, about how tiny homes and the like would not be included in this procurement policy. And then you've mentioned the Mangawhai homes as well. Now, did I hear that wrong, or is that going to be specially excluded out of this procurement policy?
No, the procurement policy applies. If you recall, not last month, in late September, council approved a procurement plan for that, which essentially aligns with our procurement policy. So it's been competitively tendered. But as part of that, we've put our mind to how we can encourage local supply, and we will include that aspect in the tender documentation.
Thank you. Councillor Paniora.
Yeah, just going back to your comment around what would you define as a local supplier? And that is someone who has significant operations in the district. That confuses me further. So I just wonder if we can look at building some principles around the decision making as to what is defined as a local supplier. Because there is some that could be have entirely employees that are entirely not within the district, but have their primary operations in the district due to traditionally receiving council contracts, and then all the opposite true, that they're outside of the district. They entirely employ local, local families that does contribute to the communities. So I don't think that there can be any hard and fast definition, but I do think that looking at a number of principles that on the whole support the intent of the policy, then I would prefer for us to look at it that way. Thank you.
Yes, I agree. There's I wasn't intending to say that was the defined definition. I did comment that there's nothing defined in the policy. But obviously, a large organisation like Ventia, who might have people employed in the district and a depot in the district, you wouldn't probably define as a local supplier, and that's why I prefaced it with a small and medium enterprise. So not large multinational organisations like Ventia or Downer and so forth.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, John. I am keen to understand a little bit more about, or will be, I'll send a note, but basically it's along the lines of when you have a new project come up that requires local support, supplies, procurement, do you more naturally go to the default of a major contractor that we already have involved and let them select, where I suspect in many instances they will not have the real in-depth personal knowledge of businesses in our community that are working in those areas. And so that opportunity for us to help build our vibrant communities is totally lost because of distance between reality and knowledge. So I think that this is a key, to me, it's a key factor, is that we need to have potentially a better understanding of when a procurement job comes up, have we canvassed or are we aware of any business in the community, the broader community we have that may be in this area, rather than just letting a major procurement owner decide who will supply.
Look, I think the point I'd make is that our procurement's not centralised, so there's a number of people across the organisation that, particularly project managers, that are looking after procurement. But the key thing is that with council having oversight of anything that's over 500,000 K, there's the opportunity for elected members to ask questions at that stage when the procurement plan comes to council for approval. To what extent and to how much that the person putting forward the plan for or team putting forward the plan for approval have considered the availability of local suppliers. Now, there can be reasons for going for larger contractors because of efficiency and so forth. a capability. Sometimes contracts are of a scale that aren't appropriate for a smaller local organisation. But that's not to say that you can't consider local supply in that procurement process by making it a requirement for the larger contractor to engage with smaller contractors as part of their response.
Thank you, John. If I may just go on there, and because you talked about that area of procurement, $500,000 and above, and exactly to my point, there are any number potentially of procurement contracts that are required that are well under the $500,000 mark that we wouldn't get access to, and that actually $100,000 or $200,000 project to a local business might be a huge factor in their ultimate success. So I actually think that the opportunity for more open understanding of the options we have comes in the under $500,000 area where we don't have oversight.
Yes, a point taken, Councillor. But I think my observation would be that there's a lot of local engagement in that space of under 500,000 K. So there's a lot of procurement that are done, and even in that under 100,000, where the default position for most council officers is to use someone local. So I think I know in my area and property, wherever possible, we use a local supplier because it just makes economic sense for both us and also, as you say, helps local organisations. So,
as long as we are walking the talk.
Thank you. Councillor Paniora?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the graph that's on page 2 of our briefing document. And I just clarify a couple of the points that you've just made around preferred suppliers. But when I'm looking at this current diagram, it only has mandatory and preferred supplier panel where it branches from expected cost greater than 100,000 and less than 250,000. So is the next policy that you're looking to bring back going to have preferred suppliers at expected cost less than 50,000, preferred supplier panels, expected cost greater than 50,000 and less than 100,000, preferred supplier panel, and then the one I've just mentioned, the one that's between 100 and 250,000, and then would I be right to assume further that where it goes to market and it's got the 3 options of a preferred supplier panel, New Zealand government contract, and market proposal tender, that under those 2, under the market proposal tender, which I'm assuming would be, the bigger contracts, that there'd still be a mandatory preferred supplier panel to award the subcontracts? Is that would be consistent?
Not necessarily. What our policy currently requires us to consider is to look to local supply wherever possible and to include it in the procurement planning process. But I'm sure you agree that it's not the case where council would use a local supplier whatever the cost. So the challenge is to look at are we creating the procurement at this I guess aggregating up to a level where it makes efficiency sense, but also allowing local suppliers to be involved. So we wouldn't look at having panels for every level, because panels are normally where you've got a big basket of work, and you can potentially have a panel of suppliers so that you've got continuity of work for them, and also that you can assure that people are available when you need them. So you'd engage 2 or 3 or 4 suppliers in a panel, and set up rules about how you'd allocate work, and how you would offer it to them. Many things in the under 50 and under 100 is often just a matter of asking for price costs and estimates from suppliers, not necessarily having panels, because it's only a one-off procurement, not a basket of procurement that you're looking to achieve.
Okay, we have one more from Councillor Mark Botha Vincent.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To honour my son-in-law,
Oh, good on you.
who has a New Zealand passport, by the way. This observation is, I would hate that this council was using its procurement policy to subsidise less efficient local businesses against getting the best value for money for our ratepayers. So there's a balance there to strike, isn't there?
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely. Yeah. That's what I was saying. In terms of efficiency, you've got to look at what's the best way to basket up the procurement that you're looking to achieve. For instance, there might be different work streams. Is it best to include it all as a big contract, or to split it up into separate tenders? And where are you going to get the most efficiency and the best cost and value for the organisation? So, because there's a lot of moving parts in procurement, obviously.
Yep, a locally based organisation should have an advantage against some having to maybe import their labour or whatever materials from outside the district. So hopefully that can work. First of all, being equal,
yes,
pick the local.
That's correct, and often does, but sometimes on larger projects, they just don't have the scale and capability that's required to manage the basket of works or services that we're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I'll take one more question from Ron Anderson, and then staff Sarah Morrison would like to add to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honour. I just make a couple of general comments here. You operate here entirely within a building industry that's dominated by Fletchers in terms of the ownership and control of nearly all products and all legislation. As such, you're confining your discussion to completely within that industry, controlled essentially by Fletchers, with the odd exception. You've really got to step outside that if you want to get exceptional savings. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Prepared over here, Your Worship. Look, I just modern day contracts very regularly use a sustainability clause in their procurement policies. So what we talked about at the moment is the outcome, which is we want to encourage local suppliers. What's the mechanism? So the mechanism doesn't necessarily have to interfere with our procurement policy or rewrite it or strategy, but you would simply insert a sustainability clause, which says when you are tendering for our work, we've got some measures. Is it jobs? Is it money? Is it local suppliers? How will you get our sustainability tick, which means you're investing in our community by us awarding this work to you. So when I look at the procurement strategy we've got a lot of government input. At the end of the day, if we want to put the local input in, the sustainability, measure matrix is a really good way to make sure you get the outcomes you're looking for, and that something comes back into the community. So that's something when John does the strategy, we would look at that next year. My recommendation would be we have quite a strong sustainability piece, jobs, investment, money, local suppliers. That's the way to capture that. If that sounds good.
Thank you very much. So if you have any further questions or feedback, please send them through. Move on to the next item, which is the Kaipara Transportation Activity Briefing. Entered online, I believe, by Calvin Thomas. Come in, Calvin. There he is.
Good morning, councillors.
And Bernard as well.
Yep.
Thank you, Calvin. We did see you and hear you. Now we're wondering if you've gone. Are you there?
Gone.
There he is. Welcome back.
Oh.
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 Oh, technology.
It's like the bad old days.
Playing with it.
If you can hear us, gentlemen, your connection or our connection is bumping you off. It's very unclear. But if you can hear us now, give it a crack.
Okay, we can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just checking whether the slide pack was being put up or whether you needed us to share it with.
We've got it, thanks.
Don't push it.
Cool. Because we can't see it, so I will just pull it up on our other machine here. So just probably before we start, I just wanted to bring the elected members up to speed on progress through the first quarter from a financial and delivery perspective. So we've just reconciled the figures up till the end of September. To date, there has been $9.2 million worth of work on the Kaipara network completed in those 3 months. That compares to the same period last year where there was 4.5 million. So a significant uplift in the amount of work being undertaken on the network over the first quarter of this financial year. The increase is primarily driven by the continued phase 2 recovery works, supported by a high usage of local contractor resources, feeding on from the previous discussion. But also, with the exception of last weekend, the settled weather has been significantly more conducive for completing the construction activities. So by this time last year, we'd already had 4 significant weather events impacting the region, which were starting to have an impact on construction. So with the settled weather and hoping that the settled weather is going to continue through, we're looking for a bumper construction season moving forward. Now, while I've been talking, I've been attempting to pull up that slide pack. And yep. But first, while I do that, Bernard will cover off a couple of questions that came through prior to the meeting.
Yeah, through the chair, just while we wait. Couple of questions here this week, today. One relating to the emergency works on Bob Taylor Road. Just to confirm, those works have now been completed, but due to the vertical excavations on site, we are expecting some fritting of material to occur over the next year or two. So we'll just keep monitoring that site. Just want to highlight some of the benefits of that work. It was low complex activities, mostly bulk earthworks, but the reuse of the material cut out of the excavation there has been used to build the road up towards the bridge, which will provide further flood mitigation in future. So a good extra benefit out of that site there. There was also another question relating to the water tabling activities being cyclic. Unfortunately, at the moment, the way things are, water tabling is not carried out as a cyclic activity. It is a priority focused activity, along with it's both the heavy and light water tabling. Just to refocus that one, recently we did provide feedback on Council's drainage deficit, which in itself emphasised the reason why we don't operate under a cyclic approach to our water tabling. Within that report, we provided a hypothetical example, which was to say if we put our available drainage maintenance expenditure solely into the activity of water tabling as it sits presently, we're looking at a 53-year rate of return just on our rural network alone. So that's the main reason why we don't operate cyclically. We do target based on priority focus. Now, what that means is sometimes when we move into a road, we do not complete a full road length of water table. We target it and that here would cut material away, or like we would lose material on site. So that's that process there. We've also put extra emphasis on this drainage deficit situation within the LTP and the work we're doing in the app, seeking additional local share to enable us to undertake more of that activity. It looks like we've got the presentation up on our side now, so I'll hand back to Calvin unless there's any further questions relating to those two items.
Did you have a question, Councillor Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually just have a request to you, Calvin. We get these feel-good factors every other time on transportation activity update. Is it possible for us to get a spreadsheet of the work not done yet every time? So we are actually at par to know not about all those nice photos, what is being done, but what is actually not being done. Would it be possible to get the elected member a spreadsheet of that and when they are proposed to be done? That kind of sheet. Is it possible?
So through the chair, to be completed, or for them to be completed?
Well, both, which is not done. So it is being completed. So there will be a timeline on that. It's phase 1 or phase 2, phase 3, but roughly when it's going to be completed. Because my focus, or I'm sure of elected members as well, is to see what is yet to be done. Because that's the kind of gripe we get from the constituent. Thank you.
Yep.
Through the chair, did you just mention, you mentioned phase 1, 2, 3. Are you referring to the emergency works? I'm just trying to be clear.
As a process, I would like to see the things which are still in the pipeline and when they are going to be completed. Thank you.
Okay, we will need to take that offline and have a talk with Jason and Nan about how we can provide that information in a way that is meaningful to elected members. Just noting Bernard's previous comments with the drainage deficits, we have over 10,000 open items of drainage that are currently not budgeted to be resolved. So we'll look at how we can provide you an annual and monthly program of what is programmed within the current budgets.
Well, just a corollary to that, I would like you to choose the top even 20. Not go into the 10,000 item. Major item works when they are going to be completed. Let's put a figure, more than 500,000 or more than 1 million. But we need to see something which is pending. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, we'll, as Calvin said, look, Anna and I will work with Calvin and see what we can do in that space.
Thank you. Okay,
Calvin, over to you, presentation.
Okay, so we can't see what's on your screens, but we're on the routine inspection slide, which is slide 2. So through there, nearly just over 99% of the sealed network inspections completed as planned, with 62% of the network inspected. Just over 98% of the unsealed network completed as planned, with 74%. Moving on to the next slide, there was 244 kilometres of grading completed. With last weekend rainfall, we expect the grading window to continue for another few weeks with the additional moisture that's come into the ground. So that is positive in the lead up to summer. Moving into the unsealed rehabilitation program, I'll let Bernard just give a little update on where we're at with that.
Yep, so we're starting to make a good bit of progress out there. We've ticked off a couple of sites already, Notorious West Road, shown in the photo there. Come up really good finish there. We have had some concerns raised from members of the public relating to the Canva. It isn't out of specification for what we'd require on a road of that type and that width. I'm hoping the feedback is more a good shift in the right direction, recognising that road has been relatively flat for quite some time and in need of these works. Across the board, though, as we do start to move into drier weather, the weather window or opportunity to continue with the pavement works is starting to slow down. So we are refocusing on preliminary works, so enabling works for next season's rehabilitation, kicking off in autumn.
Those enabling works include drainage improvements.
Including drainage improvements, culvert renewals, vegetation.
So moving to the sealed rehabilitation program. So planning is underway in those with pre-seal repairs activities starting to take place. Going to be a combination of 4 sites through the carries from here through the tract, which is part of the maintenance operations and renewals. Because of workload and contractor capacity, and also an opportunity to test the market, the other 4 sites are going out to tender. So we'll be coming back to council with the results of those tenders and recommendations to award once that process is through, which is expected to be just after Christmas. So in terms of resurfacing, we have 94 confirmed resurfacing sites through the summer period, covering 45 kilometres of road. Pre-seal repairs have kicked off and will continue through 24. With pre-seal repairs, one thing to note is there will be a period of activity on those sites where those pre-seal repairs are undertaken, and then a period of inactivity while those pre-seal repairs settle before the crews come back and do the seal. So they're potentially, we're looking at how we can work with the comms team to get that messaging out there that just because we've been there and done some initial repairs doesn't mean the job is finished. It's part of the stabilising process and everything else. Mangawhai area repairs are set to begin in October, which tie in with the wider program on the resilience of repairs on the state highway detour routes. In terms of emergency works update, nearly $1 million worth of
Getting cut.
Assessments, and supplying the comms team with an update of the status of all remaining sites, which can be published on the website. We have presently, through those emergency works assessments, identified that over half of the, a large number of the initially deemed.
Yeah, I do believe they're up the far north at the moment, so they're joining from online up there.
Shall we, there he is.
Simpler.
It doesn't make sense.
What should we do?
Calvin, just bear with us for a second if you're still there. We are having issues hearing you. It's popping in and out because of the connection where you are, I believe. Perhaps turn your video off and continue with the audio and just see if we can improve that. We didn't hear what you said in the last 2 minutes.
Emergency.
And just let us know what slide you're on. I think you're on the emergency works.
Okay, is that better, Jason?
That is better, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so just on emergency works, we've completed the emergency works assessments on all the remaining sites. From that, we have identified a large number of the initially complex sites actually have simpler, low complexity solutions. So they will be addressed in the next 3 to 6 months. And we have 14 remaining sites that are deemed complex phase 3 that are the longer term repairs. In the next few days, we'll be providing your comms team with a full list of the remaining sites and their statuses to publicise and get that information out to the public. And the last piece was just the lift in public communications, which was the final slide. There's been several regional and district publications going out over the last month or 6 weeks. And that's part of the continued drive to improve comms to the public about what is happening and what's planned to happen and status on some of these sites.
Okay, Calvin, so thank you. So that's the end of your presentation, correct?
Yes, yes, it is correct. Thank you, Jason.
Okay, Mr Mayor, are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Calvin? Okay, thank you for that update, Calvin and Bernard. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next item. This drought management plan triggers and response to presented by 1November. We're ahead of time. How many people are here? Just
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report as read. I might just take an opportunity to go through the draft management plan that Council has. So basically today is just to provide an overview of the draft management plan. Trigger levels are, our response and our communication protocols. It's a bit of a recap on our sources and just sort of flying through the district there and starting at Mangawhai, we've got a small water bore in Fagan Place. It feeds the shops and a small residential community. And then coming up the district, we've got a water supply and treatment plant in Mangawhai, servicing the community, and also Fonterra take raw water that we from the sources. In Ruai, we've got a driven plant, takes water from ground, we treat it and we push it through the Ruai community. And Dargaville is our biggest source, obviously feeding the district. Quite a complicated intake structure. We also then push water from there out to Bailey's Beach. And then just coming back, Glens Gully, we've got a small treatment plant there that's around the toilets and the residential community. So the purpose of the drought management plan is really it provides guidance to staff in terms of how to operate the sources when we do go into water level restrictions due to dry weather. It identifies how council should be implementing the drought management plan, but we've also got resource consents we need to comply with. So our plan has 4 levels, 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously they're colour coded to sort of match the severity. Level 1 is business as usual, no restrictions. And then we go down into level 2 and 3, where we get into outdoor restrictions. And then obviously level 4 is totally different from the use perspective, and a number of facilities start to get closed down. We were lucky last year. Obviously, we had a lot of water, so we didn't go into restrictions. But the year prior to that, we did. So we have been there, and we have utilised the drought management plan and the restriction process. Just wanted to sort of give a little bit of an overview in terms of how sensitive our sources are. So this is one of our takes at Kuihi River that take water to the Dargaville treatment plant. You can sort of see the pattern there of in winter, the flows in the river are quite high, and then come some of the rapidly drop off as well, and that pattern behaves itself through summer and winter. The black line there is what our consent limit take is.
Councillor Naya, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick clarification. You did mention that in Dargaville that we get it from the rivers. You didn't mention the dam we have, which is supposed to raise the wall. This data is pretty old, May 21.
Yep.
Does it make any sense?
Yes, it does, because it just demonstrates a normal period of weather from 17 to 21. The water, it's got a high peak, but it drops off quite low as well. I mean, we can bring last year's data in, but it's going to be an anomaly because of the wet weather that we've had. So I just wanted to paint a picture that when we do go into a dry period, we are vulnerable from a take perspective from the source. But you are right, as I said, and we've got multiple intakes from Dargaville, in addition to the river, and we also have our dam that we use to provide compensation flows when we take from the river, and that's part of our consent obligations that we have. So what does all that mean in terms of level 1, 2, 3, 4 and all our various sources? I'm not going to go through this in detail because one, it just provides an overview in terms of when we do click into restrictions. For example, the Dargaville, when we get down into flows less than 900 litres a second, to level 2, and then we progressively work down till we get to level 4, and we have the same pattern throughout our various sources there. So my staff, along with our con staff, managed this very early in the piece. So we've already established a drought management team. We look at weather forecasts, we look at the demand, and then we start to make calls in terms of when we socialise information with our customers, and then obviously recommendations through to the chief executive in terms of when we start to implement the restriction. So those are all sort of set out in the drought management plan, but I thought it'd just be to provide a one-page summary. We've got some good lines of communication with our communities. They broadly range from campaigns. So, we start early in terms of notifying people that, the information coming from the sources indicates a drier period. So, start to prepare. We have started to do media releases. The Mayor's done one, informing people that they should be prepared and, get your water in, get additional tanks if need be. We are part of the speedwaterwise.org.nz that provides some good information around water conservation, but also identifies that where we are with our levels and then compared to the other councils as well. We use our public libraries and public spaces for information. We update our website, but we also have a number of key suppliers that rely on the water, the Southon farm at Dargaville. Obviously, our Hapū grows through the district, but we also work quite heavily with the fire service in terms of the training that they do and the water that they use, trying to minimise that during the periods of prolonged dryness and drought. Some specific communications, Southon Farm, so we are in dialogue with their management on site. They have actually improved their practice, and so they're actually using water quite wisely. But obviously we do work with them, and they work with us in terms of how they're managing their demand. Mangawhai, Fonterra, similarly, they've gone through and done a bit of change in their plant. They're also looking at changing the product that they produce, so they're less reliant on water. So we have been in discussions with them with regards to if we were to go into restrictions this summer, what does it mean for them? And then we've also got a backup, Brooklands Dam. It's a dam that we haven't taken water from, but should we need to take water from, we've got a pipeline that goes from the dam right through to Mangawhai. And we've got a license with the dam people to use that water. In the past, it has been a problem with algal bloom, and luckily last year we didn't need to use that water because of obviously we had ample supply in our district, in our intakes. But it is a backup plan that we have available. And then we have the Mangawhai bore, and it's a small bore, and there are a few suppliers that are within the same proximity, so we've got to make sure that we manage our take. We can't over allocate. In the event that the groundwater does drop down, we've got to provide water for those. I think it's about half a dozen households that are there, so taking water in for those folk because we share the same or similar aquifer where we're drawing water from. The other actions that we're doing as a council is obviously responding to leaks quicker. We've got time periods for dealing with high priority through to medium and low, and we'll just bring some of those priorities forward because obviously we don't want to see water running down when we're also saying to people, use water wisely. We will carry out leak detection in the district, particularly Delilah and Mangawhai. What that is basically crew go in with sonic acoustic listening devices, so they listen for noise. It is very effective. I've done it myself, and it does work. So you've got to be skilled at it, but we'll bring a skilled crew in, and it just identifies if there's any leaks that are happening below ground that are not visible, and depending on the size of the leak, we'll get in there and repair them. So we are possibly looking at options where we could deploy some water services to vulnerable communities or community facilities. That's an option that we'll hold tight. It does come at a significant cost. We'll only push that trigger if absolutely needed. And then obviously as we go down the trigger levels, we start to be more aggressive in terms of how we restrict, and we then start to go through public facilities around toilet showers and drinking fountains and swimming pools. Right, so in terms of the implementation of the trigger levels, we have set up a incident response team. It's multidisciplinary, and what I mean by that is operational people, as well as our communications staff as well, including our contractors, our maintenance contractor. So we monitor the trigger levels, and any trigger level that gets implemented needs the approval of the chief executive. So myself will be making that recommendation to Jason, and then obviously myself or Jason will inform the elected members that we're in the process of doing that or have done that. And then level 4 is ultimately a civil defence emergency can declare, depending on the situation and our ability to respond and whether we need outside help to provide that. Obviously, the mayor gets involved in that conversation along with the chief executive to make that decision. So the next steps are we obviously are monitoring the weather, the forecast. The mayor did raise a good point with me that we need to bring on and have a bit of a workshop, if you want to call it that, with our tanker operators. How can we manage demand collectively across the region? Noting that the Brinduans are going to be closed. So, the closest water sources are, if we have to go onto a town supply with some reliability, is Ruakaka, off the Parore supply. So we've got some issues with travel times. We are looking at exploring alternative options. I went on a bit of a bus tour yesterday with a contractor and looked around the district for other opportunities that we could look to. There may be some short-term ones we can do with Parore. It's a conversation I'll need to have with my equivalent general manager over there. But there are some longer-term options that I would like to table for another day, Mr. Mayor. But we do need to look, now multi-years out and say, well, this problem may or may not occur every year, so we need to bring some resilience back into the district. And I've got some options I'd like to consider with the council at another point in time. And then obviously we need to implement our drought management plan as we are required to do so. That's the end of the presentation.
Any questions of Councillor Howard, Councillor Vincent, Councillor Nair?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Very many thanks. In the areas where we have use of bores, what oversight does council have? I mean, okay, you use the example of Mangawhai where you've got the one in Fagan Place, but there are any number of private bores. What oversight do we have on those that are approved versus those that are illegal or not approved? And what ability do we have to monitor? Because I suspect that there's a lot of potential bore use in there. And I think that's one question. The other point I'd make is that thank you for alluding to future opportunities for water storage. I'd really like to see some information on that coming forward sooner than later.
Yes. First question, like our Fagan Place bore, we've got to get a consent from the regional council. So it's the regional council, Councillor Howard, that approves and monitors bore takes every consent they issue, including ours. We don't have any oversight of that. And again, if there are legal supplies taken, it's the regional council that has the authority to go in and enforce on private bores that are obviously not complying with consent or people that have got illegal bores that are taking water.
So if I may just extend, do we have leverage on the regional council to get their insights as to what monitoring they're doing and what they are doing about taking action where necessary?
Absolutely, yes, we do. Yeah, we've got a regular forum set up with their staff now that getting into this period. But I think irrespective of that, going forward, we'll need to continually discuss. So the answer is yes, Councillor Howard, in terms of we are got a good working relationship with them. In terms of the second part of the question, just to provide a little bit of context, I am looking particularly at Mangawhai, because that's the source where obviously we don't have any water, but there are some opportunities there to explore that. They will have to, I'd like a quite fixed conversation on it because there are some controversies around it, but it's something that I'm happy to share with the council and go away, explore a little bit more in depth and then come back to council early in the new year.
Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just had a question regarding Mangawhai water supply. When I first came on the council over 3 years ago, there was a proposal in the works for establishing a tanker filling station on Biggerstaff Road. I was wondering, did it happen or was it still happening or couldn't reach agreement with the community over where and how? Or
yeah, look, I'll share some thoughts. So when I arrived, council had purchased a tanker filling trailer. It's essentially on the back of a trailer, you plumb it into the town supply, then you have a swipe card which opens and closes the valve. So, you know, a very effective way Watercare have them within their district. We had it parked up at Mangawhai treatment plant. It was safe, it was secure, it was bolted, it was padlocked, it was everything we could possibly do. In the meantime, we were talking with the country club. So the only source location available from a safety perspective, because you've got large trucks that are moving, was on the country club. They've got some land right at the front, just before our wastewater treatment plant. Ideal spot to put a concrete pad down, pull a pipeline, and put our tanker station there. Our filling station trailer got stolen. So basically, like 6 months ago, I think we did inform the council it got stolen. The opportunity to do that, want to do that because that would provide another source closer for those people that rely on tank water rather than going out through to Dargaville or Ruakaka. The only problem there is that when we generally get into restrictions, the station will go into restrictions as well. So it's a chicken and egg in terms of do we have that? It's a good idea. It comes at quite a bit of capital investment. I think it's in the order of $1.5 million. It's a pipeline that needs to go down to the country club. And if we have to go into general restrictions in Mangawhai, then that will be probably one of the first things that we turn off. So
did we get an insurance claim out of it?
yeah, I'll refer to Sue. We will do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, so I mean, I'm just looking at this picture of elected member visit to Waitewa Dam in 22 March, almost 2 years now, and nothing has happened. And I was quite disappointed not to see Waitewa Dam as a water supply source in this presentation. I would like to know from you two things. One, obviously, what's hindering it? Why not we are progressing with it? And when we are progressing with it? And are we still looking at 1.3 meter height or bigger than that? Because in this presentation, the Google thing says.
Yeah. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll just need to be careful how I answer this question. I did present a paper in the PECS last council or a couple of councils ago, so I'll give it a go, Councillor, but we may have to bring this conversation back into a closed session. We are looking at the Brooklands Dam increasing the height, but we are also looking at options with the Tito Tokoro Trust. Now we had a presentation from the trust. I also presented to the council my suggestions on the scheme. With feedback to the Tito Tokoro Trust, the feedback that I received from council, they're going away and looking at their options in terms of whether my proposal for the financial investment that I put forward to council is acceptable to their shareholders. So there's still work going on in the background. So we are still comparing our Brooklands Dam, our Waitoa Dam with the Tito Tokoro Trust.
So my understanding was that these are both concurrent projects. So it's not that you're stopping this just because you're waiting for a good offer from the project, which I'm not supporting, and rightly so. Because why this, I mean, I'm very disappointed that this project is not even mentioned and not being taken care of, and I'd like it to be recorded. Why
that's an ongoing issue which is going to continue through till next year.
Yeah.
So here's specifically talking about our drought management plan. Maybe what we might get is an upcoming dry summer. That will not be available for purposes.
Let me finish. We don't want to give a drought management restriction letters in both in this current weather scenario, but we like to future-proof our concept.
That's accepted. That's accepted. But what we're talking about here is the management plan being presented to us. That's all right.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm happy to.
That'll be something that's coming forward in the next few months.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I can. Sorry, Anan. Councillor Nair, you're getting ahead of yourself here. There had been no decisions made by council in this space yet. We have been working with you on the options and the other provider as well, and we'll continue to do that. And until you make a decision, that's the way it is.
But what is stopping the Waitoa Dam? That's what I'm asking.
That's the way it is.
The way it is.
Explained.
It's future. Councillor Lambert.
Yes, just to thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to reassure you, a long history and data proves that if you're a betting person, there is going to be a water crisis in this district around about February, December, January this year and following years. The stats prove it, and if there's any message being put to the contrary, I'd like to reassure you that we need to look at this seriously. We've had an anomaly this last year where we've had so much water, and we can't forget the previous years, decades of what we've gone through. So,
yeah, thank you, Councillor. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I might just take one opportunity just to clarify Councillor Nair's, because I don't want to leave the confusion on the table. There's no concurrent project here; it's one or the other, and that was the information I put to council. That decision still lies on the table. Even if we were to proceed with option A or B, either or, it's not going to get us out of this summer period. I did indicate that any decision that the council make, there's still probably about a year in terms of, it'll be the future year that we start to provide some drought resilience. If we did proceed with either the Tokoro Trust scheme or.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've had some discussions with Anand about the upcoming summer, and there are some concerning aspects in terms of private contractors who are supplying water, and we need to be aware of what they might be. So, you know, there's options with maybe with Fonterra, with tankers from them, if we get into dire straits with supply, because we have had in the past periods when in Mangawhai, for example, well, in Mangawhai and out of Mangawhai and outer areas, we've had people who had to wait 6 weeks for a load of water. So that becomes a health hazard. So we do have to take it pretty seriously. Thank you very much, Alan. Yeah, look, we will break for lunch. Eh?
Oh, do you want to break for lunch?
Yeah, if you want me to push through.
Push through, I think.
Are people willing to do one more item that was going to be after lunch so that we could, so we can push the day through and concentrate on the 17A review after lunch. So if we could move to affordable waters, I think it is.
Just give us a couple of minutes. Please stay seated. And we'll just turn off the live streaming.
Right.
So that we can get this to happen.
So we're going to public excluded.
Yeah.
See.